Hi, I'm Ann Rieselbach, the League's Program and Membership Director. Welcome to the final day of lectures by winners of PLOT, the 2025 Architectural League Prize for Young Architects and Designers. The 6 winners were selected through an open juried portfolio competition. Entrants must be 10 years or less out of an undergraduate or master's program and be based in North America. The competition theme provides a means for entrants to critically frame their work. This year, that meant, to quote the call, a directive for entrants to map out the through lines that shape their work while asking, how is architecture informed by considerations of plot, whether as land, drawing, or scheme? Similar through lines can be found in each of the firms presenting their work today, in many examples literally tied to the specificities of plot of land, the greater relationship to place, and an acute sensitivity to the process of design and construction economically, responsively, and inventively. On behalf of the League, a huge thanks to the League Prize Committee, Miles Gertler, Liz Gálvez, and Rashad Dorsey, all recent League Prize winners, for conceiving and explicating this year's theme, and for selecting additional jury members, Banaz Asadi, Mario Gooden, Jiao Yi Gu, and Liam O'Brien Jr., who, along with the committee, individually evaluated all of the entries and then collectively participated in an online jury session to discuss and select 6 winners from an outstanding group of finalists. In addition to these lectures, winners create online installations, some documenting site-specific installations, others revisiting and reinterpreting past work, part of what will be a range of a collected material content available on the League's website. You can find firm biographies now, videos of the online installations. Videos will be up soon, and there'll be interviews published later in the summer with each of the winning firms. All of the online materials and there are Instagram stories that you can still access through the League's Instagram account. All of the online material was created with valuable guidance and support by League staff members Zoe Fruchter, Sydney Combs, and Sasha Portis. Zoe, along with Damasi Darby Washington, oversaw the program also every step of the way, from the committee meetings to the call for entries, working with the committee on the jury, and then producing all 3 days of lectures. We would like to thank Eddie O'Para and his team at Pentagram, who worked with the committee to translate the theme into a vibrant design for the competition graphics. Again, from the call for entries, which has now been translated to a downloadable exhibition poster with images of everybody's installation, which you can print out and post anywhere and everywhere, and people can then be guided to the exhibit through a QR code. And then the entire program, from the competition to the installation, lectures, and related material, is made possible through the enthusiastic corporate sponsorship provided by Judlow, Tischler & Son, and Delta Millworks. The program is also supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Support is also provided by the Next Generation Fund, which supports the League's investment in early career architects and designers and provides unified support for the League Prize, Emerging Voices, and the League's student and mentorship programs, and by the J. Clausen Mills Fund of the Architectural League. League Prize public programs are also made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, and through the support of the League's members and friends. Please visit the League's website and sign up for our weekly newsletter to learn more, including about upcoming events, to find an extensive collection of online resources, such as videos and essays documenting not only this program, but a wide swath of the League's programming. League Prize Committee member Liz Gálvez will outline some of the ideas underlining the competition theme, introduce the speakers, and moderate a conversation with the speakers following their presentations. A 2021 League Prize winner, Liz directs Office EG, which is based between the San Francisco Bay Area and in Mexico. Her work focuses on the interface between architecture, theory, and environmentalism through a re-examination of building technologies. Liz's writing has been published in Thresholds, Footprint, Pigeon, and other publications, and her work has been exhibited in the U.S. and abroad. Most recently, her research has been funded by the SOM Foundation Faculty Research Prize and the Graham Foundation. She was a 2022 Art OMI Fellow and the recipient of the 2016 Seebacher Prize for the Fine Arts. An assistant professor at UC Berkeley's College of Environmental Design, Liz has taught at the Yale School of Architecture, Rice School of Architecture, and the University of Michigan's Taubman College, where she was the 2018-19 William Muschenheim Fellow. She received an MArch from MIT and a bachelor's degree in architecture and philosophical studies from Arizona State University. Following the winners' presentations, Liz will join them in conversation and pass along your questions, which you could post, please, in the Q&A section. Thank you very much. We'll see.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this third event as part of the Architectural League Prize 2025 series. I am very happy to be introducing today's speakers. First, I would like to extend congratulations to all of this year's winners. I would also like to extend thanks to Anne, Zoe, and the rest of the Architectural League staff for the important work that you do in making these programs, which are so important to young architects, possible. Winning the Architectural League Prize is a significant moment in the trajectory of a young practice. It offers not only recognition, but also a platform, a rare chance to pause, reflect, and articulate the underlying ideas shaping their work. For many of the offices, this prize is less a culmination than a point of inflection, a moment that affirms their approach and invites broader conversation about their methods, values, and aspirations. It honors designers still in the thick of experimentation, operating amid uncertainty, constraint, and ambition. As Anne mentioned, I run Office EG, an experimental practice operating between Berkeley, California, and Michoacan, Mexico. I am also an assistant professor at UC Berkeley, where I direct the Immaterial Matters Lab, focused on issues of buildings, technology, and environmentalism. This season, it was a pleasure to work with my co-conspirators, Miles Gertler and Rayshad Dorsey, to develop this year's theme. Early in our conversations, we were interested in storytelling, in nimbleness, and most of all, in an openness to multiplicity, which brought us to this year's theme of plot. The 2025 Architectural League Prize invited architects and designers to reflect on the role of plot in all of its meanings as a structuring force in their work. Whether as narrative, land, drawing, or scheme, plot acknowledges architecture's inevitable entanglement with unfolding stories, unexpected turns, and the broader dramas shaping design today. To explore how architects act as both author and respondent in the face of circumstance. Plot for us became an interesting term, both as a noun and a verb. And we were excited by the possibility for designers to spin the theme of plot to suit their own needs in applying to this year's competition. Today, I am especially curious to see how those stories are narrated, plotted, or strategically schemed through the lens of architecture itself, how designers can both frame and unfold a plot, and to examine what kinds of tactical agents we might become. Finally, I would like to extend thanks to this year's jury, comprised of Benaz Asadi, Mario Gooden, Gia Gu, and William O'Brien Jr. Next, we will hear from BALSA CROSETTO PIAZZI, one of this year's winners. The firm, founded in 2014 in Argentina by Juan Manuel Balsa, Rocio Crosetto, and Leandro Piazzi, is recognized for its deep commitment to the material practice of architecture and the potential of construction as a form of cultural storytelling. Their projects are rooted in local techniques and materials, but composed with an eye for exacting geometry and formal clarity. Their portfolio featured a collection of 14 built fictions, as they call them, which frame architecture not only as shelter or object, but as narrative, a constructed fiction shaped through the collective labor of artisans, carpenters, and designers. As one of the jurors noted, what stood out in their work was how, even as the scale of their project grows, they maintain a deep sense of experimentation and thrift, approaching construction with both precision and playfulness. There is a kind of whimsical intelligence at the core of their architecture, which makes even the most modest gestures feel expansive. We're lucky to be joined today by all three founding partners. Juan Manuel Balsa holds a Master of Architectural Design from the Universidad de Navarra and is currently a visiting professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. Rocio Crosetto earned her MS in Advanced Architectural Design from Columbia GSAP. She is the 2024 Pietro Belushi Fellow at MIT. Leandro Piazzi received his MS in Advanced Architectural Projects from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid and is currently a full-time lecturer at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Our second speaker today is David Costanza, principal of David Costanza Studio, a design-build practice based in Ithaca, New York, and director of the Building Construction Lab at Cornell University's College of Architecture, Art, and Planning, which he founded in 2020. David's work moves fluidly between digital design and hands-on construction, asking, how can architects become active participants in the act of making? Through installations, material research, and building projects, his practice navigates the tensions between computation, craft, and performance. His League Prize portfolio featured 6 projects in which construction takes center stage, foregrounding process over polish. These include a book in progress that reflects on the construction of architecture as narrative, and a stone pavilion constructed from repurposed scrap stone, demonstrating circular material workflows. The projects highlight the social and technical dimensions of architectural labor and the layered plot lines embedded in the act of building. The jury noted that his work reveals a deep investment in plot, where construction takes center stage and showcases a striking variety of mediums and materiality, always explored through the lens of how to make. They also praised the formal versatility of the projects. Some are big but light, others small but heavy, but all are rigorous, intentional, and rooted in making. Please join me in welcoming Balsa Crossetto Piazzi and David Costanza for today's talks. After their presentations, we'll move into a Q&A session, which I'll moderate. Do feel free to add your questions into the chat as we go. And with that, I'll turn it over to Balsa Crossetto Piazzi. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz, for the introductions and Anne as well. And hello, everyone. It is an honor to be recipients of the Architecture League Prize for Young Architects and Designers, and it is a pleasure to share some of our work with you today. This talk, which we have titled 3 Dialogues, 6 Projects, will center on 3 episodes or themes that bring into dialogue projects that we have designed and built in the US with others that took place in Argentina. These cross-territorial conversations serve as a framework to reflect on what matters to us when we think about and design architecture. Here and there, Balsa Crossetto Piazzi is an architecture office that originated in Córdoba, Argentina, and over the recent years has expanded its work into the US. This duality of working in 2 very different places has become a strong element in the identity, interests, and ways of working of our office. Both territories, the US and Argentina, are crucial to our work. Argentina has allowed us to design and build projects that are centered to the formation of our office, while the US has given us the opportunity to be part of relevant disciplinary discussions, to engage in other types of projects which are the test ground of new ideas, such as installations and exhibitions, and very importantly, to teach and to be part of the American academia. From the start of our work as Balsa Crossetto Piazzi, we have been obsessed with popular, vernacular, and productive infrastructures, especially those found along the roadside. We spent many hours on the car driving from one construction site to the other, and these particular architectures started to create a strong visual inventory for our work. This obsession remains with us now in the US. These architectures have become reference for our projects and the built stories that live within them.
Episode 1, Designed to Disappear. The first project of this episode is the Bial Pavilion. This is the city of Rosario, an Argentinian city on the banks of the Paraná River. Rosario is Argentina's second largest port, and this is where the project is located. The opportunity for the pavilion arose for an open competition for the 2014 Ibero-American Architecture Bienal, the BIAL, and the competition breathed call from the design and the construction of a temporary pavilion in a public space located within the port. The project will be situated in a small plaza between the two warehouses that will house the biennial exhibitions, a site historically marked by ephemeral port infrastructures once used to load the ships. We choose to celebrate this story through a pavilion whose tectonic expression will recall these forgotten architectures. The competition imposed two key constraints that define the project's tragedy. The first one, a very small budget for the required square meters, and secondly, the pavilion had to rest on historic paving, which could not be damaged during the 3 months of the installation period. Given these constraints, we decided to rent scaffolding for the 3 months, as it was a structural system we could borrow and adapt for this project. At the same time, the system allowed us to explore an architectural language where both assembly and disassembly became an integral part of the design process. After its use for the event, the pavilion will totally disappear, ready to become part of the new architectures elsewhere. We had only 3 months to design the pavilion, so choosing a modular, ready-made, and quick assembly structural system allowed us to reduce the technical complexity of the project. Construction took only 3 days. The result was a structure gradually inhabited by plants and fabrics that move within the wind of the Paraná River. Inside, the pavilion had no specific program. It became an open space that enabled public activities for the biennial. All the efforts were focused on defining the tectonics. The enclosures were made with a type of fabrics commonly used in local agriculture. The plants and stones were borrowed and returned to the municipality after the event. During the 3 months of the event, the pavilion became an urban icon that both by day and by night connected the people of Rosario with the river and the vinyl. The second project of this episode is Rise Repeat. This project is located on the outskirts of Bethel in upstate New York, and it was built within the Bethel Woods Center of the Arts on the historic site of Woodstock 69. The project was part of an open competition for the Build Fest 2024, which called for the design and construction of a semi-temporary pavilion to build in just 3 days again. And in order to meet this constraint, we studied common construction systems in upstate New York that uses off-the-shelf components. So for reasons of cost, efficiency, and speed assembly, we ultimately decided to build the project almost entirely out of outdoor stair stringers. It was very important for us that the project's environmental impact be as low as possible. So to achieve this, we studied the material life cycle of this component and proposed a design that will allow the pavilion after its life in Bethel to be disassembled and reintegrated into its usual life, eventually living on as a part of domestic structures within the Bethel community. Finally, the pavilion is this simple system of wooden porticos that aims to blend into the natural landscape of Bethel. The scale of the pavilion is almost domestic. and serve as an infrastructure for resting and provide shade, inviting visitors to pause and take into the surrounding landscape. Ultimately, the pavilion is a device for reflection, playfully bringing the everyday life domestic component into the public ground.
Episode 2, Small Things in Large Spaces or Other Ways to Deal with Scale. These two projects that we will show now in this episode explore the concept of smallness and how projects of a few square meters dialogue with vast spaces, either the expansive territory of the Argentinian agrarian pampas or large industrial interiors. Rural Restrooms is a project located in the countryside of southern Córdoba, specifically in a family-owned dairy farm. The project emerges from the need to provide additional outdoor restrooms for the workers here. The particular landscape of the Pampas is defined by its infinite horizon that extends as far as our eyes can reach. However, when visiting the site multiple times, we realized that this infinite landscape was actually inhabited by multiple small-scale productive artifacts, very contextual to the site, such as strange cards for multiple uses, billboards, or agrarian machines. This made us think of the project also as a small infrastructure that could set a dialogue with the heterogeneous territory where it was going to be placed. We decided to create then 3 boxes, made only by folded sheets of galvanized steel, a material recurrent in this rural site. The galvanized material is crucial for the project as it resists the tough conditions of the rural outdoors, dirt, rain, wind, and sand. By folding the galvanized sheets, we were able to use only one material, both as a structure, as enclosure, and as finish for the project, a material that also requires 0 maintenance. The whole project was built by 2 local masons, and this man, Rodrigo, the metal worker, or herrero, as we say in Spanish, who made the restrooms in his metal workshop and then installed them on the site. The bathrooms are conceived basically as 3 small spaces, 3 small rooms, each offering a separate toilet or shower. For this, we studied the module of the metal sheets and defined 2 ways of cutting them and 4 ways of folding them, which gave us 4 different types of pieces, A, B, C, and D, with 0 waste of material. Regarding the plan and the section, the project seeks to eliminate both doors and windows. The plan is the outcome of a spiral-shaped layout that replaces the door with an entrance, and the section replaces the windows with just a separation between the metal panels and the concrete floor and the ceiling. Once the galvanized pieces were assembled, we mounted them on a track and transported them to the farm. There, within 1 afternoon, we installed them. Something really beautiful about this project that we discovered while installing it were the reflections that the galvanized sheets captured from the landscape. Once they were located in place, the panels reproduced the sky and the grass around, giving to this small intervention the opportunity to hold deeper and broader dialogues with this contact, and even reflect the lights at night, to become, at last, another piece of rural infrastructure as the silos and miles around. The following project of this small dialogue is named Animals, and it tackles the challenges of adaptation and reuse of large, if not huge, industrial buildings. The project is located in Syracuse, New York, a city that in the early 20th century was part of the Northern Steel Belt, later renamed as the Rust Belt, together with other cities such as Detroit, Chicago, or Buffalo. This particular condition of all industrial cities that created an extraordinary number of buildings that remained abandoned and unused, many of them occupying large plots in key areas of their cities. The Gear Block, the building in which the project is located, is one of them. The clients who bought this building during the pandemic had the desire to transform it into a communal space, focusing especially on local teenagers and kids, providing areas for art workshops, education, mental health, and a space for events. The building is cataloged as heritage and was previously the hosting space for a truck factory in the 1930s, and later became the site for the Strathmore Paint Factory, which traces can still be found on the walls of the building. The gear block has multiple fantastic spaces inside. This area that is intended to be a ballet room on the 3rd floor, this one in the ground floor that will become an art gallery, the shed that will be a space for events, and others like the old paint laboratory, and of course, the fabulous basement. The clients did not have the funding required to completely transform and update the whole building, so we proposed a project based on small and soft interventions. We started by using the materials that were already available there, that were at hand, which were mostly a large amount of heavy-duty metallic shelves. We disassembled them, cleaned them, and painted them. And the colors that we selected were meant to stand out from the background, referencing to the safety colors used in construction sites. Animals is centered in producing a series of architectural elements such as columns, as we see here, walls, platforms, curtains, pyramids, or benches, like this one, as a strategy to activate and occupy the building. This one, for instance, that's called the centipede, a bench that can take multiple configurations thanks to a pivot point that operates as a joint between the wood planks. We also built other elements like platforms for events and performances, taking advantage of found materials that were in the building. We assembled some translucent walls to divide the spaces and also installed curtains that were used for projections. Other devices took the form of pyramids, and others were very, very small, which we called mosquitoes. These elements can move around the building, occupying the basement full of these yellow columns, or the gallery space in the ground floor, or even be placed all together inside the shed for events. Animas, it's mostly a project about small transformations for large-scale adaptations. It is a test for quick ways to reoccupy an existing space, and probably an alternative to hack the system a little bit, while larger and more complex rehabilitation efforts are still in the process of being approved.
Episode 3, Heavy, Wet, and Dry. The first project is called Quincho. This project is very special to us because it's connected to one of the most important cultural traditions in Argentina, the asado, the barbecue. Córdoba is very popular for its handmade bricks. Cortaderos is the name given to the place where bricks are made. They use natural soil and they are cut and dried in the sun. Later, they are cooked in large ovens made also of mud as the one of these images. Then they gain the red color of the clay contained in the natural soil of Córdoba. To the west of the city of Córdoba lies Sierras de Córdoba, a landscape of small mountains and rivers. In the first valley of the mountainous regions lies Lake San Roque, located 30 kilometers from the city of Córdoba. It's a popular getaway spot for the city dwellers looking for a break. At the point where the mountains meet the water, we had the opportunity to build a quincho for a family from Córdoba who frequently travel here to the rest and recreation. This photograph by Argentine artist Marcos López, which showed the Last Supper with the local elements, captured the spirit of Argentinian asados, collective celebrations around the fire and large shared meals. The quincho is conceived as 2 walls and a roof, a silken room big enough to host large meals and gatherings around the table. The construction process was simple. We involved a small local team of builders and used materials available in the area. The project defines itself as an abstract object that gently integrates into the natural context. We're very interested in the search for a certain geometric abstraction in our work, while at the same time, we operate with a site-specific logic regarding the materials and construction techniques used in each project. We drew very few plans for this project, and the project was mostly built with only one plan, the structural plan. And this made total sense to us. We were essentially building a roof. The roof is made from small concrete precast beams, which are the most common building material for roofs in Argentina. They are light, so they can be moved just only by 2 people. The wall thickened to house 2 grills, 2 bathrooms, and 2 storage rooms, while supporting the main space for the asado ritual. They hold the service while allowing nature to flow through the quincho, giving the sensation of barbecuing in the open air. Minimal details and unfinished aesthetic reflect an attitude of responsibility and pragmatism. No ceilings was added, leaving the precast roof being exposed. An electrical wiring runs externally, simplifying construction and reducing future maintenance costs. The quincho operates an outdoor structure that protects us from the sun and the rain. A small pagan temple hidden in Córdoba where the rite of the asado collectively celebrate. The last project we will show you today is 12 Rooms, a pavilion designed for MIT in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Sitting between the 2 air Saarinen buildings, the chapel and the auditorium, and in proximity to the Charles River, the pavilion emerged as a brick line, a long, shallow, well-described oval. This composition of 12 rooms reconstruct the space at MIT where pivotal inventions and research were born. From the telephone and the first digital computer to early prototype of email, these innovations are inseparable from the labs, lecture halls, classroom, and office at MIT, some of which now exist only in memory, remnants of buildings that were demolished. 12 Rooms is between documenting the past and constructing the traces of a new possible space in the present. The project is an invitation to reflect on the built stories that live in the building with inhabitant, dialogues and invention that are part of the room memory, through the use of brick, a resources that is strongly tied to Cambridge history and built environment. 12 Rooms assembles a selection of rooms spanning time and space. By extracting the footprints of these rooms, we craft a new spatial composition that allow visitors to step back into the spaces and learn about the groundbreaking inventions that took place with them. The installation is both a reconstruction of old spaces and the trace of a new possible collective space. The bricks are dried, stacked, and teed together in packs of 12 units, a method that craft which allowed of the quick setup of the installation and which make possible to reuse the materials after the project ends. The bricks used in this project has been donated by a masonry supplier based in New England. Once project was completed, the bricks were donated again for the construction of a bike path in New Hampshire. In this project, one moved beyond time and space to enable other forms of collectiveness and inhabitations. Walls make rooms for things to happen. They are solid and tangible. They are also political. Walls can enable or divide, conceal or project, separate or hold together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you all for coming. First, let me echo what my colleagues and friends have shared over the last weeks and months. I'm thrilled to be amongst this year's cohort of League Prize winners. I also wanted to thank Anne, the entire ARC League staff, the jury, for giving me this opportunity, and Liz for the recent very kind introduction. I'm presenting at the end of the third lecture series, and having seen all the incredible work to date, really excited to share more about my practice and lab in this context. Let me start by addressing the title, as many lectures often do, under construction between small details and big plots. The work I'll show today ranges from a chair to a house, though each is treated similarly as a design project. Each project varies in scale, from the part to the whole, from the detail to the building, and the ability to zoom in and out and to consider the repercussion of small decisions on a larger scale, sometimes regional or global, is central to my approach. This method evokes the work of architects and designers Charles and Ray Eames, from furniture to buildings, but particularly their 1977 video, Powers of 10, which is playing here in the background. The short film explores the notion of scale, beginning with a picnic scene and then zooming out by a factor of 10. It continues this zooming out until it reaches the entire universe. Afterward, the film zooms in to progressively smaller scales, down to the level of subatomic particles, revealing the effects of adding another zero. This mode of thinking hopefully will be evident also as I transition to my own work. As it did for the Eames, thinking across scales has allowed me to discuss a steel bolt or a joint, while simultaneously discussing extractive processes, labor dynamics, geometry, aesthetics, and expression. So my teaching, research, and practice bridges across design and building, engaging in the reciprocity between how we build and how we design. The work itself is interdisciplinary, overlapping with structural engineering, material science, and computer science. Simultaneously, the work is grounded in architectural expertise, cutting across design, representation, fabrication, computation, and building technology. In 2015, I established the design office David Costanza Studio, or DCS. Through material experiments, installations, and exhibitions, the studio's work addressed the role of digital processes in architecture, synthesizing the fracture between material constructions and digital technologies. Thus, the computation, fabrication, and material experimentation came together in a mutually supportive framework, in which the drivers and constraints embedded in material translations informed the design process. The capacity to move fluidly between design, analysis, simulation, machine programming, and fabrication was at the core of the practice. Over the years, the experiences and prototypes developed in the studio formed distinct research streams that define my current work. The ideas and knowledge acquired through the simultaneous process of designing and constructing, essentially thinking while making, began to expand. And this growth sparked a desire to further enhance my research by exploring the broader connections between building technology and design. This is why, in 2020, I established the Building Construction Lab, or BCL, to advance these research streams further. Each design project, installation, or exhibition became one instantiation of an ongoing research question. In this way, the Building Construction Lab synthesizes design and research, thinking and making, operating as a framework to interrogate the role of recycled materials, waste materials, prefabrication, labor, and affordability in architecture through the lens of building technology and construction. So here in the slide, you can see the design studio on the left and the research lab on the right, and the oscillation between ongoing lab projects and instantiations in the design studio on the left. So this shift also responded to a growing awareness within the architecture discipline of the building industry's effects on the planet. As an architect teaching and practicing during the climate crisis, I felt compelled to examine the role the built environment had in shaping it. Buildings create about 40% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, and this fact alone demands that architects rethink how we design and build. To do so, we must interrogate the tools we use to design, the materials we use to build, how and where we build, and what impacts these decisions have on the environment. These questions can be answered by challenging the role of building construction, not just as an essential stage in the materialization of architecture, but also as a constitutional site for knowledge production. Thus, three main research streams emerged by concentrating on building construction as the driver informing my design practice. The first stream examines ideas around materials, including low carbon materials, recycling, reuse, life cycle, and affordability. The second stream deals with construction, which includes understanding and working with diverse labor practices, the effects of automation on de-skilling of construction workers, as well as investigating new applications of prefabrication, digital manufacturing, and robotics. And finally, the third stream addresses the environment, thinking seriously about what decarbonization means for architecture, how high-performance buildings can be achieved at lower costs, and what alternatives might exist to practices that rely heavily on the extraction of natural resources. These streams, discrete as they may appear, are never studied in isolation, but crisscross each other in my work. And these research streams interrogate how methods of production condition and shape the materiality, the constructability, and environments in which works of architecture emerge. They seek to identify effective measures for reducing emissions and eliminating extractive and exploitative practices associated with architecture. My goal is that by elevating building construction knowledge as the inherent site of architectural expertise, a better understanding of materials, construction, and the environment, and the knowledge that emerges from their intersection will inform an architecture that addresses the environmental, social, and cultural impacts of building buildings. For example, the materials we use to build are central to reducing architecture's environmental impact. As global warming disproportionately impacts marginalized and underrepresented groups, reducing carbon in architecture is imperative to promoting a more equitable built environment. Life cycle analysis has helped to foreground a series of strategies for rethinking our building materials, such as low carbon materials, natural materials, recycling, reuse, and in the context of retrofits, carbon preservation. Therefore, in my research, the materials focuses studying those of life cycles. Consider my work with plastics. The importance of this research lies in reframing plastics, viewing them not as cheap and disposable, but as essential and irreplaceable. Plastic materials and mechanical properties are essential to building construction and cannot be overlooked. But a shift from single-use to recyclable plastics and from non-renewable synthetics to renewable bioplastics position this material as not only impervious, durable, and affordable, but also sustainable. In short, a shift from waste to a resource. Here are a few examples of previous projects that illustrate my approach using plastics in my work. VEER, which is a collaboration with my colleague Andrew Colopy, investigates the use of waste streams to be upcycled and utilized structurally, informed by material constraints and manufacturing limitations, resulting in a furniture prototype. The material used consists of 60% rice husk fibers, an agricultural byproduct, and 40% recycled PVC, resulting in a fiber-reinforced plastic that offers improved mechanical properties compared to plastic alone. The overuse and overproduction of plastics have led to a large accumulation of plastic in the form of pollution. Under these conditions, recycled synthetic plastics already distributed across the planet emerge as a sustainable source material. VEER integrates recycled synthetic plastics with rice husk fibers, which are often burnt at the end of harvest, diverting and repurposing a significant source of pollution, producing a prototype that demonstrates the mechanical, aesthetic, and geometric possibilities of the material. Another project is Draped Stone, developed in collaboration with the Cora Stone Company, which investigates the potential to use discarded and low-yield stones in a structural capacity. Many types of stone considered low yield produce vast amounts of waste. The research was guided by the possibility of reinforcing fracture lines and other natural deficiencies in stone with a composite or a plastic, allowing the material to be salvaged and used structurally. The introduction of the composite provided the stone with additional tensile strength, enabling the construction of a hanging marble canopy. In tip-tap, bioplastic 3D printing was used as a mold-making technique for a one-off structural node. The node served as the structural connections defining the angles and geometry of the pultruded fiberglass tubes. And this structure served as the frame for two woven surfaces, producing an interactive urban object that allowed for sectional occupation. Twisted half-inch polypropylene marine-grade rope was used to construct a soft interface, producing a playful, energetic woven urban object. Also made using bioplastics is Closed Loop, which is a public bench manufactured using robotic 5-axis printing. The bench offers a place of pause and rest along primary pedestrian routes on Cornell's campus aiming to connect often discrete groups or individuals by creating a piece of shared public furniture. Moreover, the project tested the use of bioplastics in structural applications, combined with the automation of production offered by robotic 3D printing. Finally, on the use of bioplastics for structural purposes, the lenticular column is part of an ongoing grant titled Recycled and Renewable Bioplastics as Alternative Building Components. The research and accompanying building components, in this case, a column, aims to demonstrate the capacity for recycled synthetic plastics and renewable bioplastics to perform structurally at an architectural scale through full-scale prototypes and to develop a workflow for a non-standard automated fabrication process using robotics. The research builds on the processes developed in closed loop while beginning to operate at a building scale, so no longer as public furniture. The research continues to expand on robotic 3D printing, offering greater degrees of control while further expanding the scale of the work. Additionally, it reduces the labor required to construct unique, one-off structural plastic components. These projects demonstrate how an interrogation of building materials is present in my work. Other projects aim to rethink how we build. In this stream of research on construction methods, advancements in automation through digital manufacturing and robotics are evaluated against their potential to impact construction labor. Labor is often overlooked during a project's early design phases. By teaching, this neglect has tremendous implications on the construction site. When labor is addressed, attention is placed on the labor necessary for the production of building materials, rarely on the labor of construction. My research tries to revert this relationship to labor. It focuses on the labor of construction rather than the labor of production, which refers to the labor required to produce the material products delivered to a building site. When the materials arrive on site, it's a different set of laborers that transform that material through construction. In both cases, workers may be at risk. My research highlights the architect's role in shaping labor conditions on site by fostering a critical engagement with construction labor through disciplinary expertise. The following slides present examples of my work where labor is explicitly addressed in both the project's design and conception, as well as its realization. Thought builds on the work of Frei Otto and the Institute for Lightweight Structures to explore the rapid deployment of tensile structures, which are unmatched in their capacity to enclose large spaces using minimal materials. Thought tackles one of the most challenging aspects of composite manufacturing, which is the production of a mold. It utilizes tensile surface morphologies to define the geometry of a vacuum-assisted, resin-infused textile composite structure. Large custom molds are extremely expensive to construct and only viable when produced in large quantities, benefiting from an economy of scale. Instead, Thought uses a tension surface built with a simple frame and cables, replacing the typically labor-intensive and costly mold. This is made possible through the close alignment of geometry, material, and structure. And throughout the project, topics of prefabrication, labor, and affordability emerged as key drivers in the research. The polycarb house engages in construction directly as a design-build retrofit of an existing building in Ithaca, New York. The speculative research is put into practice as questions for a deep energy retrofit demand the invention of highly specific and quite strange details, prioritizing constructability alongside performance. In the project, localized planning is necessary to achieve low energy and low carbon standards without compromising costs and without requiring specialized procedures. It also maximizes the preservation of pre-existing structure and material. However, lowering carbon emissions and improving labor conditions and increasing building performance are only meaningful if they're also affordable. Affordability promotes social equity by ensuring that everyone has access to safe, comfortable, and dignified housing, regardless of their income or background. Thus, the details and the assemblies tested on the polycarb house are designed so that non-experts can, if needed, replicate the means and methods used to ensure a low-carbon future. Under these premises, the project develops scalable tactics for constructing affordable, high-performance residential buildings, both new construction and retrofits, that result in manuals for cost-effective techniques to improve building performance and limit embodied and operational energy. The Polycarp House was central to my Arc League exhibition, after which the lecture is titled Under Construction. Under Construction is a 4-part video installation that explores the realities of architectural and spatial production through the lens of labor. Rather than showcasing a completed building and its final photographs, each film captures an active construction site, highlighting a process where architects, workers, and builders engage directly with materials, tools, and construction. The video documents the execution of a design concept constantly redefined by the context, constraints, and experimentation needed to tinker with the conventional building assembly. This back and forth between design and construction, between architect and builder, shapes each decision. It takes viewers from an initial state just before a deep renovation to the current phase of construction process, beginning in 2022 and still ongoing. Over the last year, I've been at the American Academy in Rome working on a project titled Bending Stone. The project intersects historical stone aesthetics with contemporary stone manufacturing and quarries as the site of stone extraction. Like previous projects, Bending Stone engages with the ongoing discourse around decarbonizing construction and the renewed interest in pre-industrial building methods as alternatives to industrialized materials. On the one hand, stone offers a low-carbon alternative to industrialized high-carbon materials such as steel, glass, brick, and concrete that rely on fossil fuels. On the other hand, stone provides exponentially more building material acre for acre than trees and is globally available. Moreover, by maintaining the integrity of the stone as a monolithic block, solid stone buildings can be quarried in the future. These observations may seem common sense, but the most ubiquitous use of stone in construction defies common reason. Stone used today for construction, such as limestone, is typically crushed into a powder and burned in a fossil fuel-intensive process just to make cement. In this case, limestone loses its structural capacity to play a secondary role in concrete's narrative. But what if stone, both ubiquitous and unfamiliar, were to reemerge as a structural material? Historically, stone made up some of the earliest buildings still standing, and yet in contemporary practice, it's treated as a surface to wrap and clad carbon-intensive, industrialized building systems. Thus, the goal of the project is to reframe stone as a low-carbon structural building material while exploring the aesthetics of structural stone and defining a new language in contemporary construction. Analyzing the uses of stone throughout history and the contemporary practices that are employed in quarries as sites of stone extraction, Bending Stone explores the use of stone for a decarbonized future. I'd like to end with this project. The themes that I've addressed are central to an ongoing book project with Routledge Publishers titled Building Constructions around Materials, Labor, and the Environment. And this manuscript provides a theoretical overview and a collection of relevant case studies for the development of design and building technology education. It focuses on materials, labor, and the environment, advocating for a fundamental shift in architectural practice. Instead of addressing these considerations at the end of a design process, the book emphasizes their importance from the beginning. The traditional design phases of schematic design, design development, contract documents, bidding, and construction administration are complicit in a design process in which form is privileged from the onset through abstraction, composition, and defamiliarization techniques. Considerations of materials and construction are often disregarded until after a formal resolution has been obtained. Thus, issues of labor and the environment, for example, are not considered during the initial design phase. And this way of working inherently produces buildings where constructability, energy efficiency, workers' conditions on job sites, and costs are often afterthoughts. Inversely, the later considerations are central to the design conception that the book argues for. In the book, I argue for localized strategies that center architects' tools and knowledge and how these might inform ways of thinking for those invested in building buildings. The book posits that architecture, though inherently complicit in exacerbating carbon emissions and disregarding construction site labor conditions, can still formulate reparative actions. To conclude, I'd like to return to the Powers of 10 video. Discussing the movie at a conference in the 1970s, the Eames considered a realignment of values necessary to address the environmental concerns at their time. Decarbonization is not just an ecological or a technical goal, but it's a value that can shape how we assess works of architecture today. Thank you.
Thank you, Balsa Crosetto Piazzi and David, for your lovely presentations. It's been wonderful to get a deeper look into your work from your own perspectives. To the audience, I want to invite you to please send us any questions that you might have, and I will be happy to extend those to our lecturers today. But maybe just to get us started, I wanted to pick up on maybe for me what I see as kind of the most obvious thread between your two practices, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I really see this kind of idea of construction, of making, and even more specifically of materiality as being quite important and central to each of your practices, albeit, of course, with unique sensibilities for each of you. And I wanted to open it up by just asking each of you to talk about your approach or your relationship to how you see the architect's relationship to building production, right? So how involved do you get in the actual making of something that we draw? I think historically the practice of architecture transitioned from making into representation, and I see both of you almost kind of probing that a little bit open. So yeah, if you have thoughts on that, I'd love.
Yeah, maybe I can get started with a comment, and thank you, Liz, and thank you, David, also for the presentation. And definitely, of course I also see this same thread that you are mentioning. I think that the relevance of being like to take into account before the start of the project how the project will be built and which will be the sort of actors that will take place during the construction, like from the material and the resources to the labor to the site itself, and to understand probably like the larger impact of architecture happens, or at least I think that's something we share when architecture is built. So in some way, these physical transformations that today are it's really relevant to understand the kind of like shifts that they produce in the built environment, especially in the times of environmental crisis that we are living today, and we have been living for some time now. I think that the way in which from the office we have started working is to be quite aware of how buildings are constructed in the sites where we work, which are the resources that are available there, and what we can do with that could offer something different, while at the same time be really pragmatic and responsible in the answer. And I think that it's actually a very a way that we really love in the way in which we produce architecture, because it allows us to really understand the site beyond what we only see, to understand how it operates, how the ways of productions are there. And I think that understanding these transformations, it's quite relevant for today. And I think that also the topic of building, it's quite questioned sometimes, like depending if we are talking on the global north or the global south. But at the same time, building remains quite important. Like things will kept being built. And I think that it's quite relevant, it's quite urgent that architects are more and more closer looking at how things are being constructed to shift the things that may not be working, and to try to produce projects that will be gentle with the environment, while at the same time being provocative and interesting for the architectural discourse.
Yeah, I'm happy to agree and maybe expand on that a bit. I obviously I think the role of construction in architecture is really important in the way that it allows us to think more deliberately about materials and processes involved in building buildings. And for me, I think hands-on engagement with construction has been one of the greatest learning opportunities, is to actually be on site and to both collaborate, but actually work with local craftspeople, contractors, local builders, to question maybe some assumptions about how things might be built and the way that they were drawn, and so that there might be a more of a reciprocity between the way that they're drawn and the way that they're built. Because you did bring up the representational component. I think that's getting us, by engaging more directly with the construction site, it's allowing us to challenge this role a bit of the drawing as the end of a kind of an architecture as a representational project, by engaging more directly with both materials, material production, and then on site with the actual construction. So I really like, of course, being involved in all of the projects from the making perspective. I think that's usually where the invention happens. I was demonstrated in the previous lecture as well. I think all of those projects are fantastic because they do begin with a stringer, and then that leads to a project, right? It's not designing something and figuring out how to build it after. And so I think that way of working, in some ways it's pragmatic, it leads to more affordable work, which allows us as young architects to be active and to build, but also hopefully has larger repercussions because we need more affordable architecture, we need more buildings. So how does that have a bigger impact?
Yeah. Maybe if I can just add a little things. I love that what David is saying about the approach to be on site, and you, Liz, mentioned something about the production of drawings and media and things like that. So for us, we are producing less and less drawings. It's like the role of the drawings for us is kind of a shrinking, and in order to build, we start to work in the negotiation of just talking. It's just, for us, is we trust in people we build with, and also we kind of don't like the denomination of labor, maybe because the translation in Spanish is not the nicest one. It's like the people we build with, which is more interesting for us, because we trust in them, we believe in them, and probably we just sometimes we need more conversation, with more negotiation, just through talking, rather than just producing drawings to deliver an idea, or to deliver like an assignment. So for us, these kind of things also are shifting in order to kind of understand the knowledge that the construction itself produce, and the knowledge that is already there, and we fully engage with that.
I think that is really interesting. I want to pick up on David's kind of reading of your practice, Balsa Crosetto Piazzi, where David, you mentioned like that there's a difference in designing something and then figuring out how to build it, as opposed to the kind of reciprocity, or even beginning with the stringer and then figuring out, hey, this is a really interesting thing. Like, what is the lineage and the history of how this product works, and how can I mine that, or exaggerate that, or expose that in a novel way? And I think that's a really interesting way of working. One of the things that I find really exciting about making, and the kind of difference between sitting in the studio and designing, and the act of going out into the field or into the lab and actually trying to produce something, whether it's a model or whether it's a prototype or the full scale thing, is that making very rarely goes precisely as expected. And maybe to come back to this theme of plot, one of the things that Miles, Rayshad, and myself were really interested in unpacking was how we as architects and designers, how do we react to circumstance, to the unexpected, to chance, And I was wondering if there's any anecdotes or stories that you would be willing to share in regards to how perhaps something went in a kind of unexpected way in this process of making or the kind of hands-on construction of the projects.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a short short story. Yeah, this is the polycarb house, and I think it's I'm sure part of every renovation project, but there's so much uncertainty going into renovation of the existing conditions. And this was a 1950s original construction with the 70s addition that now I'm operating on. And so there were a lot of unknowns going in. It was only after, stripping the walls down, removing all of the layers, that you kind of see what the actual conditions of the house were. So there were issues of settlement that we had not anticipated, where because of all the partitions, it was really hard to get a sense of the floor stability. And so we actually had a 3.5-inch dip in the middle of the floor that forced us to make new decisions than our initial design proposal. As we went to stabilize the foundation, we had shale, and so we're sitting on a stone ledge. And so to underpin the foundation, we actually had to go under the house with a mini excavator to chip away at the stone to produce the underpinning. So there are so many unknowns that benefited from that direct engagement on site. And I was very fortunate that it's in the same city that I teach in. And so I could be on site very frequently. But there were so many unanticipated conditions that emerged from removing the drywall or trying to level the house that were not part of the drawing set. And so I think that's back to our earlier conversation, the capacity to have that dialogue, as was mentioned previously, and work through those conditions directly on site was really helpful. And so we find that we're actually going back and updating the drawings more than we are using them to build. We're reflecting the decisions we're making on site in the drawing set so that we have them as a record for the building inspector, but not the other way around. And so it's an entirely different model. I think it's just one example and probably pretty common with retrofits to a certain extent, but I think it's an exciting one that demonstrates the value of the direct engagement between architect and builder on site.
Yeah, and maybe to add to this, and thank you for the question, because it makes us think of something that we discuss a lot within the studio, that is this idea of trying to do projects that have less and less detail, so that the kind of success of the project does not really it's not really sitting on how some detail could be solved, that maybe it's something that will change during the construction, but rather on other larger ideas. So I think that's kind of related to this thinking that we have been trying to develop over the past years of projects that will be built with local materials, but then there is another dimension of the project that is trying to look at more geometric or abstract configurations within the construction of the project, so that we can operate and solve details, but the key ideas of the project will remain sort of on board. So I don't know, in some words, we usually say in Spanish, like less detail, more architecture. And I think that this also relates to how our office has shifted a little bit over the past years, of us being more time in the US, maybe less time in Argentina, and starting to do sometimes more projects. So maybe at the beginning we were all the time on construction sites because we were in Argentina full time. And then we started to understand that there were conversations that need to happen, as Leandro was saying, at the beginning of the project, to understand how it's better to build this, how it's better to build sort of some ideas and thoughts that we have about the project, and craft this definitely with the people we work with, but then to also learn that if something's changed within the project, the project itself will be successful for us because there are other larger thoughts within the project that have to do with the scale of the project, with proportions, where some like kind of like bigger ideas. And yeah, this thinking of like trying to do like less detail and more architecture is something that we recurrently like discuss within us. And maybe to your question, Liz, about some stories, like maybe one that comes to my mind, it's about the rural restrooms. At the beginning, this project, we were going to build it on site fully. And it started literally from a small plan in a letter size print, working with the metal worker, that we got a coffee and we sat there and we started thinking how we can build this. And from these conversations is that the project evolved to be just simply the folding of these pieces and the assembly of these pieces, and then understanding that it was better actually for him to do this in his workshop and then transport it to the site. So like the logic of the construction of the project changed. Instead of being built directly on the farm, being built in the workshop, and also the way in which the pieces were assembled were also crafted together. So yeah, maybe also like less drawings and more conversation can be also added. It can be good.
Well, to pick up on this conversation with the bathrooms, which I believe were in Argentina, and I understand you're all very involved in academia, specifically in the Northeast. One of the questions that I have for you, Juan, Rocio, and Leandro, is that your projects often engage with these hyper-local techniques. And even in the case of the asado, you talk about social rituals, right? And I was curious how you think about tradition as a kind of material or a tool in your work. And how do you think about the translation between these cultural rituals? You briefly mentioned earlier the kind of North and the South and the kind of dialogue that might be happening there. And I think you're very nimble in kind of managing this back and forth. And I'd be really curious to hear your experience with that translation.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe for us it's kind of an organic way. Just it's like we don't overthink about it, to be honest. It's just kind of I think Rocio was mentioning in the beginning of our lecture about that we're kind of a persistent seekers. It's just we're just I know open eyes all the time, and for us the more common the things that we see, the more sense that make. It's just if a lot of people is doing things in one way, why we just not continue doing it in the same way, right? So I think for us is this kind of a attitude is not related with a specific territory. It's kind of on our way to proceed. So for instance, the first project that we were seeing about, I don't know, like the Bethel pavilion, which took like this kind of a very common wood frame construction system that you can see. Like I just take my car, drive 2 minutes, and I'm seeing like 200 of stairs that is basically the same pavilion, right? So, and the same thing with like the quincho. It's like the quincho is exactly the same technology of all the houses around of the quincho. I think it's like the way that we work with the proportions, the way that we work with the relationship between the materials, the way that we kind of reassemble the logics that already exist in the site is the way that we like to work with. Because also, again, I think David mentioned something that is very rooted in our practice, which is the idea of to work with the non-high skilled labor basically makes the architecture more democratic. And we truly believe in that. It's like the fact that architecture is something that needs to reach broader agents, and everyone, if everyone is able to build and engage with the construction process, the more democratic and the more, I don't know, like social engaged that we can have. So for us, I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think that's kind of the method and the way that we produce and think.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. I have a question for you as well, David. That's maybe actually very much tied to what Leandro was just asking about this idea of the non-high skilled labor. I think something that really strikes me about the work that you're doing is the nimbleness and your ability to oscillate actually between very high-tech production, very precise, beautiful mold making, all the way down to DIY residential work and detailing. And I'm wondering what's the kind of thread that connects those for you? But also I'm curious to hear is, do you have a preference or a kind of like predisposition to which of those is more enjoyable, or do you kind of enjoy the kind of labor of robotics versus the hands-on DIY in the kind of same way? So kind of two questions, like what are the kinds of threads that connect these very different kinds of labor that maybe are like you doing a grasshopper script on one end to you like jackhammering the foundation of a house?
Yeah. One question. I'll try to answer. This is what I've been trying to reconcile. I think that's why maybe the powers of 10, I started with that because I knew the range of work is quite vast. And so being able to, talk about, really a bolt detail and where you hold a wrench so it can be a single person versus 2 or 3 individuals to make a joint assembly. All the way up to now I'm visiting quarries over the last year and looking at sites of extraction and how those can be translated in different waste that is produced in those material streams. And so we're talking about like vastly different scales, but there's something that's tying it all together. And that's where I think hopefully building construction ties all of these things together, whether it is that joint, that detail, or the chair project, all the way up to the way, at full scale, the building scale. So I'm hoping that building construction is that thread that ties it all together and that oscillation that we were talking about between design and making. And so there's always a back and forth, and it can be kind of a really small scale, almost industrial scale object. I'm always looking to see how it can translate to an architectural scale. So the chair prototype, for example, was part of a facade study to see how that material could be used on a facade and what are the limits of the material manufacturing. For the stretched tensile structure, it ended up being a table prototype, but it was designed as a 50-foot long pavilion. So part of it is like scaling back and forth between grants and research funding to see like the ambition versus the production. And so there's a bit of that. I wouldn't say that I necessarily have a preference. So I think I'm, whether I'm in Grasshopper programming a robot or jackhammering concrete, I'm quite happy in either world as long as I'm switching back and forth between design and building and hopefully continuing to improve both by that exchange. I'd say maybe one thing related to your earlier portion of the question that I think is really important and maybe related to some of the material product questions of the kind of off the shelf, et cetera, or the non-skilled labor has to do with the capacity to produce anything once. I think we can essentially make anything now between enough material and funding, we can construct anything. I don't think that's that interesting. I think the capacity to replicate a process, to be able to train someone else how to do it so that it can be done at scale, so that it can have larger impacts, is far more interesting. I think that's true for how I design like a window assembly on a house. And it's also true for the algorithms that I developed for the robots, because we can do anything once, but the capacity to replicate them and have bigger impacts, I think is really important. And so I'm always looking, not on the one-off or looking for the one-off, but those opportunities where you can design a systems way of approaching a design problem that can have bigger impacts that can be translated.
Maybe to add to that, David, I completely agree, and I think that it's connected to some things that we have been just saying about these logics of understanding the material production of each site. So I think that as architects, if we can try to do and sort of produce projects that are using materials that are largely available or that do not have, like, I don't know, that they do not come from the other end of the world, that their means of productions are quite accessible. And you were mentioning these in the house that you showed, and Leon was commenting on these previously. Somehow the project can be reproduced or can be like some thoughts and knowledges that are produced during this process of construction can be read through the project. I think that this is something that, I don't know, we have in common, that the sort of process of production and the process of construction can also be sort of a process of knowledge where it's not that complex. It doesn't have like 12,000 layers. It does not come from like 20 different countries, but it's something that you're able to see and understand one material, two materials, understand how they are placed, and understand that, I don't know, someone who passes in front of the building may want to do that again or not, but it's readable. And I think that capacity, it's quite interesting, and it's not that frequent in projects in architecture in general across the world. So I think that if, as architects, through these things that we have been saying, like conversations with the people that are making and building, conversations with the clients, conversation with the people that it produces or extracts or cultivates the materials, this will allow us to make buildings that are also more readable, that can like communicate some sort of clear thoughts, yeah, to a broader community maybe.
I know there was one more question Liz was going to pose, although it's been partly answered by these, but go ahead and then we can sign off. We'll just keep the answers short so that people are done by 2.
Yes, completely. So I'm, as Anna's saying, in a way, both of your practices are alluding to this question or this idea of scale. I love, David, in your case, you're talking about the bolt and also the kind of quarry or the system, and Balsa Crossetto Piazzi, you're talking about thinking about where the materials are coming from and how they manifest on the site. And we have a question from the audience that is asking about how have co-authoring and collaboration at different scales figured into your work?
I can address it really briefly. I shared 2 projects that were collaborations. One was with a colleague, Andrew Colopy, who is at Rice University, and it was a material research that then led to the chair prototype. I think that one was really exciting because we had a shared interest around materials and geometry, and had no sense of what the final outcome would be, and then it kind of evolved through our iterative testing. The other is with a manufacturer, which is the stone project, the old stone project from 2018 with Core Stone Company in Madison, Wisconsin. So there was a back and forth with a company and knowledge fabricators on how to work with stone. And again, going into it from essentially having little hands-on experience with stone construction, relied on learning from my collaborator in that context on, the first thing I did there was learn how to split a block of limestone by hand, right? That was day one visiting, working at Quora. And so it was a really productive experience on learning how to work with the material. And so those are 2 examples, but it began with a material interest.
Yeah, I think for us is kind of a similar approach. So there are many projects that we show today. We collaborate with colleagues, but also with students. I think that's also an important thing to mention. For instance, in Right Repeat, we collaborate with Craig Moriarty and Michael Stradley and 12 RPA students. And then at the MIT project, which was part of the Art League installation, we collaborate with Georges and Ortiz and 8 MIT students. So for us, these kind of conversations again that happen, that kind of things in where we work with others, it's extremely important for us. We don't believe in this idea of the solo, the singularity, the authorship of architecture. And I think this is also not only about people, but also about technology. And I think that's the kind of the thing that we're trying to express. The idea of we don't pretend to scream loud. We just want to be a part of something that already exists.
Perfect. Thank you all. This has been just an absolutely fantastic batting cleanup session for this year's League Prize. Fascinating information. And I want to remind everyone still online, and there are a lot of you, that you can visit and learn more about two of the projects that were discussed today, the Polycarp House and 12 Rooms. Those installations are already online on the League's website. These lecture videos will be up soon, and then there'll be interviews actually about each of these projects appearing later in the summertime. So thank you all for joining us. I think it's been a great season. I think that the different ways that the plot line has been stretched, iterated and twisted, and all sorts of other things have been utterly fascinating, as has been the sort of mix of different kinds of practices that we've been able to see through these 3 weeks. So thank you all for taking part, and more to come.